Point of Unit 2, Code 1 is because I could not stop for them. So, this poem is highly important as it immediately introduces the main theme or the central idea. Central idea of what? The surety of death, inevitability of death. So, why? Now, because death as an unavoidable reality, you cannot avoid it. The phrase, because I could not stop for death, suggests that what the speaker was too occupied with the life to think about death or dying, isn't it? We all are too busy in the process of our war that we stop thinking about that what is our life, and when we have birth, we are going to die. Isn't it? It means we are occupied. Occupied means we are over with lots of responsibilities, burden, activities, right? So, or you can talk about all those significant uh, wants, right? So, this reflects how humans often ignore or avoid thinking about death. But death comes for everyone when the time arrives, isn't it? Now, the second thing is called as a death takes the initiative. So, how does death takes the initiative? Because when you talk about the title, that emphasizes what death is in control. Because I could not stop for death. So, it is indicating that death is in control and not the individual. So, death is not under the control of an individual, right? Death is in control. So, the phrase it is stated, he kindly stopped me in the point that indicates what or indicates the idea that death is not a terrifying force. It's not a terrifying force, but a patient guide who arrives when it is time, isn't it? Now, death as a journey, not an end. Death as a journey, not an end. So the title implies that death is not an abrupt or sudden stop, right? But rather it is a transition into another phrase. It means like you burn, when you burn and you spent your time. So similar to that, the death comes and another phrase comes out, isn't it? Now, this is supported by the kind of a line where it is stated carriage ride metaphor. So that represents the speaker journey towards eternity. Eternity means permanence, right? Now, that is what you would find out the title because I could not stop for death, right? Indicates that what the contrast between life's business and death's patience, life's business and death's patience. So the speaker is too busy to stop, but death is not in a hurry. The speaker is what? Too busy to stop. So, but you would find out death is not in a hurry. It would come. It patiently waits and guides her, guides the point to see the afterlife, isn't it? So, this contrast highlights how humans focus on daily life, but ultimately have no control over when death comes, isn't it? Or when death arrives. So, the title, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, effectively captures the main idea of the point. And it is stated that the surety of death and its gentleness, patient nature, and you can say that uh, completely depending upon the time. So, in that case, you would find out when you say Charles Dickens portrayal means description of death as a polite companion. Death is nothing but a polite companion rather than a fearsome force. Right? It makes the poem deeply philosophical and thought influencing. The title sets the tone for this reflective journey into mortality and entity, right? Mortality and eternity, isn't it? Now, in that case, when we go to the poet, right? Emily Dickinson, Emily Dickinson, not Charles Dickinson, Emily Dickinson. So, Emily Dickinson in the year of 1830 was born and died in the year of 1886. So she was an American poet who is known for her reclusive lifestyle. right? That's something called as a unique poetic style, reclusive lifestyle that indicates about then completely separate from the society. She wrote nearly 1800 poems, but only a few were published during her lifetime. So Emily Dickinson's poetry is nothing but a characterized by unconventional capitalization, and slant rhymes. Three things: punctuation, capitalization, slant rhymes. Right. So her themes often moves around death, immortality, nature, and the human self, human soul. Right. So despite living in near isolation or separated from the society, her poetry reflects the deep knowledge and philosophical engagement with life and the afterlife. Right. Her exploration of mortality and eternity. So, in points like "Because I Could Not Stop for Death" shows her huge contemplation of the mystery of existence. Right. So, today, if you talk about that, Emily Dickinson is considered one of the greatest American poets, isn't it? Now, if I go to the poem, I "Because I Could Not Stop for Death." So Emily Dickinson, through this poem, right? So is trying to give a huge meditation on mortality. So the passage of time and the transition from life to eternity through personification, that's something comparing human's quality, symbolism, giving symbols and imagery. So Emily Dickinson redefines what? Redefines death, not as something to be feared of or feared, but as a gentle politeness and surely uh, a kind of a process, sure process. The poem presents nothing but a calm acceptance of death. So you shall not get into the, too much anxiety, too much nervousness, too much fear. You should accept the death with a calm, right? And making it one of the most celebrated works of American literature. So if you talk about that, the poem begins with what? The poem begins with "Because I could not stop for death." Right. Now that the first line, it stated what? Now, since I was too busy, right, with the life to think about death, मैं बहुत busy हूँ, right? So मैं death के बारे में सोच नहीं सकता, right or not? He kindly stopped the for me. He kindly stopped the for me. He refers to whom? Death, isn't it? So here death is a personified. तो डेथ को एक मेल के साथ कंपेयर किया गया है, ह्यूमन बीइंग के साथ कंपेयर किया गया है. कैसे? ना, डेथ एज अ जेंटल एंड पोलाइट फिगर. डेथ क्या है? एक जेंटल एंड पोलाइट फिगर है, who comes to take me away. When it comes, humans turned a body, right, which have no life. The carriage held, but just ourselves. The carriage, it's nothing but a metaphor for passage of the passage of time or passage to the afterlife, isn't it? So the carriage uh, held, but just ourselves. It means the carriage, a metaphor for the passage to the afterlife, carries only me and them. Carries only me and them. So, and immortality. So here you would find out immortality. What is that? Immortality is also present. So signifying that or giving importance that death is not the end, it is permanent, immortality. Mortality means what? A human being is mortal, right? It means it is going to die. Immortality is also present that indicates death is not the end, but a transition or moving to eternity. Eternity means called as a permanence, right? So we slowly drove, he knew no haste. We slowly drove, he knew no haste. It means the journey is calm and not hurried because death is patience and doesn't rush. So इसका मतलब क्या होता है कि means जो जर्नी, किसका जर्नी? ह्यूमन बीइंग और ह्यूमन लाइफ का जो जर्नी है, तो वो बहुत बहुत काम है एंड अनहरिड, राइट? और यू कैन से दैट व्हाट मींस ह्यूमन बीइंग्स का जो जर्नी है डेथ तक है. सो डेथ के बाद जो जर्नी होगा वो बहुत काम होगा एंड अनहरिड होगा. अनहरिड मीन्स नॉट क्विक. व्हाई? बिकॉज डेथ इज पेशेंस, राइट. डेथ इज पेशेंट एंड डज नॉट रश. डेथ के पास क्या है? धैर्य है, राइट और नॉट, और इट इज नॉट क्विक, सो क्विक. एंड आई हैड पुट अवे. I had put away means I have left behind everything, my labor, my leisure too. So what did I leave behind me? So I left my work, my pleasures, right? My pleasures of life all are abandoned. Abandoned मतलब discontinued. सब कुछ अधूरा रख के मैं जा रहा हूँ. Isn't it? क्या क्या चीज? That called as मेरा job and मेरा means leisure time, right? So for his civility. For his civility means because death is so cautious and polite, right? So we passed the school where children stroke. We passed the school where children stroke. It means the poet stated that they pass by a school where children are actively learning and playing, symbolizing nothing but what? Childhood, right? So at recess in the ring, the children are playing in a circular formation, right? So symbolizing nothing but the innocence and youthful activity. Youthful activity. We passed the fields of gauging grain. We passed the fields of gauging grain. It means the poet also said that what they passed fields of ripened grain, symbolizing nothing but a maturing and the prime of life. Right? We passed the setting sun. It means even they passed the sun as it sets, symbolizing old age and the end of the life, isn't it? Now, what do you find out? First, you find out we passed the school where children stroke at recess in the rain. We passed the fields of gauging grain. We passed the setting sun. So this indicates that how we enjoy the childhood, how we enjoy the innocence and youthful activity, and how we turned maturity and the prime of life, and how we turned old age and our life is end. Right or not? So, or rather, he passed us, or rather, he passed us. So, it makes a kind of a correction to the poet by saying that what instead of us passing the sun, it actually passes over us, and that signifies the passage of time, right? How time passes. The dews drew quivering and chill. The dews drew quivering and chill. So the poet said that the cool evening dew begins to form, and that represents nothing but the coldness of death, right? So for only gossamer, my own gown. For only gossamer, for only gossamer, my own gown or my gown. So here the poet said that what means for only gossamer. It means I am dressed in a thin. I'm dressed in a thin, delicate gown, and that symbolizes what? The fragility of life. So when you get old, what happens to you? You get weak, you turn thin, you appear well ugly, isn't it? So the poet stated the same that I turned old, and what happened means I'm dressed in a thin, and I looked means very weak, and my picture symbolizes nothing but the weakness of life. My tippet only tune, my tippet only tune. It means, so what do you mean by tippet? Tippet is nothing but a scarf. Scarf, you understand? Girls generally wear scarf, right? My tippet is a scarf, or you can say that shawl, right? So, and tulle, only tulle. So, tulle is nothing but a fine, light fabric. What? Suggesting nothing but a burial shroud or ghostly attire. So, when you die, what happened? A white or maybe red means a fabric cloth covers your body from head to toe, isn't it? So, that indicates nothing but a burial shroud. Burial shroud का मतलब होता है कि मरने के टाइम पे जो कपड़ा पहना जाता है, कपड़ा रखा जाता है, उसको बरियल श्राउड कहा जाता है, राइट? सो और घोस्टली अटायर, और जिसे देख के बच्चे या तो लोग डरते भी हैं. सो दे फील लाइक व्हाट इट इज अ घोस्टली अटायर, isn't it? We paused before a house that seemed. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. So the poet said that we paused before a house that seemed. It means the poet said they stopped. Where did they stop? They stopped before a house, right, which represents nothing but a grave. So, like for us, our house is our home and where we stay with our family. But after death, what is our house? That the grave, that the grave जो खोदा गया होगा, जो बड़ा सा 6 फुट या 7 फुट का एक हाँ ग्रेवयार्ड खोला जाता है ना, उन सब जिसमें 4-5 लोग क्या करते हैं, उसको डिग करते हैं, राइट। सो दफना जाता है जैसे हम कहते हैं। सो यहाँ पे भी वही हो रहा है। सो द पोएट सेड दैट दे स्टॉप बिफोर अ हाउस। So who stop before a house when they take the body and want to bury the body? So at the same time, what do? They dig the 7 foot soil with a 5 to 6 long, right? So means a burial ground was made, and that burial ground is nothing but the house of that dead body, isn't it? Which represents nothing but a grave or tomb, tomb. A swelling of the ground, a small mound in the earth. So it was done in the earth. So describing nothing but a burial site. It is nothing but considering as a burial site. So the roof was scarcely visible. So you cannot also see the rooftops. So that was also hardly visible. The grave has a roof, but it is barely noticeable, right? And that emphasizes it to what? It's a simplicity, how we live. Whether you are Uttam Mahapi or you talk about Ratan Tata, right? So everybody has the same place, right? That called as a 8 foot, a 7 or 8 foot burial ground, isn't it? So, and that shows nothing but the simplicity. No one has the richness or poorness, right? So everybody lies in the same house, right? So the cornice in the ground, a cornice is a described edge of a roof. Cornice is referring as a means edge of a roof, right? So decorative edge of a roof. Here you can say that burial ground or buried underground, and that reinforcing the idea of a grave. Since then, these centuries, and yet the speaker realizes that centuries have passed since her death. Since her death. So feels shorter than the day. Feels shorter than the day means yet it feels as brief as a single day that has passed. I first surmised the hearse's heads. I first surmised the hearse's heads. So she first became aware of the direction the hearses were headed or hearses were headed. She first became aware of the direction the hearses were headed, were toward eternity. So it indicates that I first surmised the hearses heads, so were toward eternity. So it indicates that they were taking her towards a permanence, and that symbolizes life after death, right? Now here, if you observe that the carriage end, the carriage ride, when we say that the carriage ride, that represents what? The journey from life to the afterlife, the journey from life to the afterlife. Death is not portrayed as a frightening. It indicates that death is rather as a gentle guide, right? Third is called it the school, fields, and setting sun. They symbolize the different stages of life, right? Like childhood, adulthood, and old age, right? So the house represents a grave. The house represents a grave, and the realization of time's passes suggests the permanence of the soul. Soul is permanent. So in that case, if you observe, the main idea in the poem is what? Death as a gentle guide, instead of depicting death as cruel or terrifying. Emily Dickinson represents him as a death. Death is known as a him, as a kindly gentleman who stops for the speaker. He is portrayed as cautious, patient, and gentle politeness, which contrasts with the traditional fearsome image of the dead. Right. Second, it's called as the journey from life to death. When we say that the carriage ride symbolizes the transition from life to death, with a different landmark represents a school age, a school time, childhood, maturity, fields of grain, and old age setting sun, isn't it? So the concept of time and eternity, that's also you find out. Time is distorted in the poem, right? The speaker realizes that centuries have passed since her death, but it feels like only a day has passed. This suggests that in death, time loses its usual meaning and reinforcing the idea of immortality, means permanence. Then fourth is called as the acceptance of mortality. When we say that the acceptance of mortality, the speaker doesn't resist or stop death, but holds it with calmness and serenity. Calmness and serenity. There is no mention of struggle or regret. Only a peaceful surrender to the surety. So then the fifth one is called as the house, which is considered a metaphor for the grave, where the poet stated that the final resting place is described as a house, right, with a hardly visible roof and cornice in the ground, subtly depicting a grave. This suggests that death is not an end but a new form of existence, isn't it? Now, let's come to the discussion of the poetic devices used in the poem. If you observe the poem carries with lots of poetic devices, starting with the personification. When we talk about personification, we understood death is personified as a polite gentleman. Second is called as immortality. That is also personified, isn't it? So, because it accompanies death, suggesting that afterlife is part of the journey. Who means immortality, right? So then next is called as a symbolism, like you talk about the carriage, the school, the fields of gauging grain, the setting sun, the house, which is known as a grave, isn't it? These are nothing but called as a symbolism. They symbolize something, isn't it? Then third is called as imagery, like we talk about visual, tactile, visual, like you say, we pass to the school, fields of gauging grain, setting the sun. So these images create a clear picture of life stages. Second is called as a tactile. So when you say tactile, that called as the dews, dew, quivering and chill. That influence the coldness of death. Then third is called as a gossamer, my gown, tripet, only 12. That suggests nothing but a burial shroud of ghostly attire. Then you would find out the next one is called as irony. When you talk about irony, the speaker was too busy to stop for death, but death patiently waits and takes her on journey where time stops to matter, isn't it? So the final stanza reveals an unexpected shift. The speaker realizes that what she has been dead for centuries, but the memory of the journey feels recent. So that makes a kind of a contrast. So therefore, it is known as irony. One understands something, one happens something. So then the fifth one is called as a slant rhyme. When we talk about rhyme, so Dickinson uses partial or imperfect rhymes. The rhymes are not perfect, like me and immortality, me and immortality. That creates nothing but a sense of uneasy and mystery, which suits the poem's theme. Then the last one that you would find out is called as a metaphor, right? The entire poem is nothing but an extended metaphor for death as a journey. So the horses head toward eternity that represents nothing but the movement from mortality to the afterlife, right? So finally, if I would conclude this point, I would say that what Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death is nothing but a meditative and a thought influencing poem that changes the traditional idea of death into a peaceful nature. So, or peaceful experience. So, or inevitable experience. So, through the use of personification, symbolism, imagery, Dickinson creates nothing but a ton of calm acceptance rather than fear. So the poem reflects on what lifetime and the afterlife, right? Ultimately, or finally, the poet suggests that what the death is merely another phase of existence rather than nothing but an absolute end. Got the point? That's what is all about. Poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death.